this gives you the opportunity. And Keith, you said it yourself, like you still will pick up nursing shifts and having the ability, I still consider my first love is nursing and patient care, and having the opportunity to be able to be at a patient's bedside when you want and how you want on your terms has brought so many people back to nursing.
What's the difference between 1099 contract work and being a W-2 employee? And which choice is best for you? Let's dig into the great 1099 versus W-2 debate with Jeannine Raymond, the Chief Nurse Executive and Senior Vice President of Client Success at Nursa.com, right here on episode 494 of The Nurse Keith Show. Hey there, this is Nurse Keith. This podcast is always about you. That's right, it's about you and your personal and professional development, your nursing and healthcare career, and the healthcare system writ large. And I'm here to share education, ideas, and informative interviews with some of the most inspiring people from the worlds of healthcare, nursing, entrepreneurship, and beyond. I love having you along for the ride, and I always want to thank you from the bottom of my nurse podcaster's heart for being part of the growing Nurse Keith Nation, especially as we head down the road to episode 500, which is just 6 episodes away. And if you'd like to help other people find the show, you can leave a rating and review over on Apple Podcasts or Amazon or Spotify. And you can become a patron at patreon.com/Nurse Keith. That's patreon.com/Nurse Keith. For as little as $2 a month, it's a great help to keep the lights and things rolling over here on the Nurse Keith Show. So if you'd like to go to Patreon and become a patron, I would really appreciate it. No matter how you're interacting with the Nurse Keith Show, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. The show notes are at nursekeith.com, and you can also find the show notes in any app where you find yourself listening on your smartphone or other device. And like I said, we're here today with Jeannine Raymond. She is the Chief Nurse Executive of Nursa.com. And Jeannine, it's great to have you here. And my first question for you is this: why is it imperative for nurses like me and many others to understand the difference between W-2 work and 1099 work?
Well, Keith, first, thank you so much for having me on the show. It is truly an honor to be here. And I am very excited to dive into our discussion today and share my perspective with your fabulous audience. So I think before we get into that question and dive into this great debate, let's clarify what we're actually discussing. And we're really discussing gig nursing, Keith, is what we're talking about.
Okay.
So what is gig nursing? It's been around, I would say, for several years now. However, it gained significant traction during the COVID-19 pandemic, where it accelerated the adoption of gig work in healthcare for both acute and post-acute operators as they struggled to address the sudden and unpredictable challenges that they faced with staffing shortage. So what is gig nursing? Back to the original question. And it's a staffing solution that empowers nurses to decide when and where they choose to work. That's the cliff notes there, Keith. So as we dive into this, we can start talking a little bit more about 1099 versus W-2. So where do you want to start with this?
So, gosh, where to begin? I mean, I am a 1099 worker, and I also have a W-2 job, and it's always mysterious to me on a certain level. And I know it's mysterious to a lot of nurses who I talk to. So I think what I first want to understand is, can you just describe, like, what is a W-2? What's the purpose of it? And then can you contrast that with a 1099 so we can kind of define our terms and know what we're working with?
Sure, that would be a great starting point. A W-2 is you are employed by the employer. 1099, you're an independent contractor. You are self-employed. But really, that's not a sexy way of saying it. You're an entrepreneur. and you
Mm-hmm.
are a business owner as a 1099. And, it's great that you shared that you do both because that really is probably the biggest takeaway that I think the audience can gain from today's conversation. We can unpack both sides of the house, but you don't have to make a decision, Keith. You can actually do both. And it gives nurses the freedom and the flexibility to decide when and where they choose to work. So, do you want to go into W-2 first, a little bit more?
Yeah. So from my perspective, a W-2 is a form you fill out when you get hired, right? And
Yeah.
you put your name and your social security number, and you basically are telling the employer that they're going to be taking taxes out of your paycheck. And there's usually like a worksheet, and you can delineate how many dependents you have and if you're deducting anything. And if you want a little extra taken out each paycheck, right? Towards your taxes at the end of the year. So that's kind of like what you do with the W-2, right?
You do. I mean, there's other things, right? So you are an employee, when you are a W-2 worker. So a lot of times, most W-2 employees are offered benefit packages, which include paid time off, options to participate in retirement plans and health insurance. And, if taxes keep you up at night, well, it's pretty simple, right? It's that box that you check when you're filling out the I-9 for your W-2 employment, where you determine how much taxes you want to have removed. So, and W-2 for some folks could possibly give them stability if stability is what they need.
Mm-hmm. Right. And like for what my W-2 job, what I do, because I do have a lot of contract work I do, I have my W-2 employer take a little bit extra out every paycheck. And so that I'm paying some taxes in advance, so that I have less to pay at the end of the year. So I know you have those sorts of options. And so W-2 is, an IRS designation, right? It's an IRS form. So let's contrast that with a 1099. What is a 1099 and what does it mean?
So, what does a 1099 mean? You are an independent contractor. You are self employed. And there are many ways to call yourself self employed, Keith. You could become a 1099 worker today, uh, right? All of us could on various apps. It doesn't have to be healthcare as yourself. If you want to stand this up as a business, which I would recommend, but I mean, this is not a one size fit all, then you should create an LLC and you should stand it up as a business. And with that, it will help you build out your brand and it'll help you as you move forward with determining when and where and how you want to work and for what rates that you want to work for. So, uh, all of that can be done if you choose to just do this as an individual as well. But there are some benefits, I believe, to creating your own business when you stand this up, particularly as it relates to taxes, more so than anything else.
Okay. So the 1099 is a form, like when you're going to work for a gig job, they give you a 1099 instead of a W-2. And my experience is that the employing organization is always very clear that you're going to be responsible for your taxes, that they're not taking any taxes out. And you fill out the 1099. Now, you just used a term a couple moments ago that I think we should also clarify because that might be a scary term to some. And it also might just be a term that they don't fully understand when it pertains to themselves. And that's an LLC, which is a limited liability corporation. So, what does it mean to have your own LLC? And what are the implications if you decide to form one?
There are no implications as I see it, Keith. What it means is you're standing up a business and you're creating a brand, whether you're a consultant, you're a gig worker, and then you're managing your finances through your business, not as an individual. So I am not a lawyer, so I cannot get into like the protective nature of an LLC. But a lot of gig workers do prefer not only from the legal separation of self, but also from the benefits of taxes. As
Mhm.
a business owner, there are more deductions that you can utilize for tax purposes.
I see. So if you're a gig worker, if you're a gig nurse and you don't have like a regular employer, you can form an LLC and you can actually get paid through that LLC. It has its own bank account, all that sort of thing. And again, like you said, you're not a lawyer. So people would have to talk to a lawyer and an accountant to figure out how to do that in the state where they live, because there's rules in every state, et cetera. So tell me a little bit about, you know, if you're paying your own taxes rather than your employer taking them out, what what are some of the things you need to watch out for when you're a gig worker? Like what should you make sure you do? What are some maybe some caveats that people should be aware of when they have their own LLC and they're taking care of their own taxes and an employer's not doing it for them?
You know, it doesn't, and I hope that when we have this conversation and the audiences listen, let's not, I don't want to overcomplicate this, right? Because
Okay.
it's pretty exciting for nurses to be their own boss and to create their own brand and have their own business.
Okay.
One of the applications, if you will, that for our organization, Nursa, we have a whole landing page for nurses as they're looking to explore the gig work lifestyle. And it breaks it all down. And one of them, to simplify it, since, nurses, not every nurse started as an accountant, there's some software that we recommend called Keeper Tax that is just download it, on your phone. And the nurses can just keep up with their expenses, whether it's the equipment that they just purchased, a new stethoscope, scrubs, um, supplies for their home office to manage their schedule. So they can keep up with that in real time so that when it comes time at the end of the year to file your taxes, it's not a nightmare, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
from an employer status, it's really how you choose to get paid, and then your taxes reflect it, right? Because at the end of the year, with your W-2 job, Keith, you're getting a W-2 form.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the year, as an independent contractor, you're getting a 1099 tax form. And there are guides and lots of information on the website that you can peruse and understand, like how you want to plan accordingly for taxes. But I would say that what we share at Nursa, and I know most organizations would, or anyone looking to stand up a business, quite frankly, is have a conversation with your accountant in advance. And, from a legal implication, if you want to go with the LLC route, quite frankly, you could actually set it up yourself, but it doesn't hurt you to have a conversation with a lawyer as you're trying to stand up a small business as well. So that way you have the resources that you need and the support team that you need so that you can go forth and work right when and where and how you want. And we're not trying to overburden the nurses as being a 1099. We're trying to empower them and take control of their career and their finances in their life. And it's pretty exciting when you have the opportunity as a nurse. I don't know about you, Keith, but when I started as a nurse, I did not think that nursing would ever see these options.
Mm-hmm.
The options are, do you want day shift or night shift?
Right. Right. Do you want to work in the hospital or you want to work in ambulatory care? Right.
Right.
So it is kind of exciting. And I think the options for nurses have broadened very greatly and deepened. And I think you're also right based on your perspective from Nursa and the surveys you've done. And we'll talk more about Nursa in the second half of the show, is that nurses have a lot of choices and gig work, the gig economy really did become a thing during the pandemic quite a bit. And, with like Uber and Lyft and, TaskRabbit, all these different ways that you can earn money, as a self-employed person have just popped up everywhere. And now nurses can do the same thing. And it is really exciting. And, I think having an employer who pays your taxes and does all those things and takes money out for your retirement, et cetera, there is a certain stability in that. And you used that word earlier when we began the conversation, that some people want that stability. But I think a lot of people more these days want flexibility. So what have you found through your surveys and through the people you work with through nursa.com? What do you hear from nurses when they talk about this notion of flexibility? What are they really after?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say, first and foremost, the nurses are after the flexibility and the autonomy. They also, to circle back to the pandemic, right? A lot
Mm-hmm.
of nurses left the bedside, and then a lot of other nurses left to join travel. And because, the economics made sense. And I would say that there is still a nursing crisis. It's not at the same level as the pandemic for many reasons, but we're still, and we will be for many years to come, in a nursing crisis. And what can we do, Keith, to get folks back to the bed? And that is giving them the opportunity for freedom and flexibility. One of the things that we find is, nurses like to work for multiple orgs, right? Without the
Mm-hmm.
limitations of exclusive employment.
Mm-hmm.
And quite frankly, who doesn't want to work for higher pay?
Right.
And, this is all of the advantages of being in this lifestyle of the gig economy, whether you're choosing W-2 or 1099. There are options out there, but with the 1099, it is ultimate freedom and flexibility. It is your own business. It is your own brand. It is your ability to market yourself. It's your ability to try different hospitals,
Mm-hmm.
different outpatient centers, and and let's face it, it also gives you an opportunity to network and grow and expand your network. And you never know where your next step is going to bring you. So it really does allow you to expand your horizons. And think about it. Why did a lot of folks leave the bedside? Because of the lack of flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
This gives you the opportunity. And Keith, you said it yourself, like you still will pick up nursing shifts, and having the ability, I still consider my first love is nursing and patient care, and having the opportunity to be able to be at a patient's bedside when you want and how you
Mm-hmm.
want on your terms has brought so many people back to nursing.
Mm-hmm. And I think something that you mentioned a couple minutes ago is your ability to check out different organizations and different facilities and employers. So I think that idea of test driving an employer as a gig nurse, and you go in for a couple shifts as a gig nurse and you realize like, oh my gosh, this place is an absolute mess. And if you signed on as an employee, it's a much bigger deal to pull out, right? You've got to give notice. You've got to you've got to go through all these hoops to get out of there as an employee, because it takes more to extricate yourself from a job. But if you're a gig nurse, you've checked out the facility, you've worked a couple shifts, right? And then you can be like, I'm in an exit stage left because this place just doesn't have it together. Is that what you hear from people, that they're test driving employers and checking them out?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because we recently did a survey, over 400 nurses, and we
Hmm.
learned that 33% of them are on the hunt for either a
Wow.
full or part-time job and
Wow.
using the platform as an opportunity to test drive, if you will.
Hmm. I think that's really important information. And when we come back from the break, what I want to do is talk more about what you've learned about the average gig nurse from your surveys. What are your nurses telling you, the nurses that use Nursa? And I also want to talk about what Nursa actually does and touch on, what your responsibilities are there and what Nurse's mission is. So I'd like to dig a little bit into the organization and find out more about you and about the larger organization. So hang in there with us. We'll be right back for the second half of episode 494 of the Nurse Keith Show with Jeannine Raymond, the Chief Nurse Executive and Senior Vice President of Client Success at Nursa.com. Are you looking for a fascinating and novel way to empower and elevate your career? My wife, Shada McKenzie, is a gifted traditional astrologer and reader of the tarot with clients around the world, and she offers my listeners a 10% discount on their first consultation. Shada's approach to astrology emphasizes the integration of both modern and traditional techniques as they've been practiced for over 2,000 years, and she brings her sensitivity, life experience, and wisdom to every consult. Shada's work can reveal deep-seated patterns and unlock your potential to live a more meaningful personal and professional life. I and many of my clients have benefited greatly from Shada's mastery of these ancient tools, and if astrology is aligned with your personal belief system, I encourage you to consider reaching out to her at thecircleandthedot.com or email her at Shada, S-H-A-D-A, at thecircleandthedot.com. Remember to mention the Nurse Keith Show for 10% off your first consultation, and thank you. And welcome back to the second half of the episode, number 493. We're here again with friend of the pod and my new friend and colleague, Jeannine Raymond. She is the Chief Nurse Executive over at Nursa.com. That's Nursa.com. And Jeannine, right before the break, we mentioned, just sort of glancing over, the surveys that you've done of nurses who used your platform, Nursa.com. So let's dig a little bit more into the data that you've extracted from these surveys and conversations with your users. So what are some of the other things other than schedule flexibility and the 33% of nurses who are out in the market trying to find their next gig? What else have you learned about the nurses, and how do you extrapolate that out to the profession itself?
Sure. All good questions. So one of our key learnings from doing this survey is that, the nurse clinicians are out there using other platforms, not just Nursa.
Mm-hmm.
And the average number of staffing apps utilized by an independent contractor, shall we say, is 3.
Really?
So,
Wow.
so Nursa does a lot to engage the clinician community, if you will. And we, of course, have a real interest in our clinicians and keeping them satisfied and continuing to work on our platform. And the nurses want choices. So back to earlier when I was sharing with you, our original finding is 33% are on the hunt for either a full-time or part-time job. This gives them the opportunity, and by them diversifying their own personal portfolio of opportunities, if you will, it gives them a broader reach to work. The other interesting thing is that 72% of all gig nurses work another job.
Mm-hmm. 72%. Wow.
72%.
Okay.
They have either a full-time or a part-time job.
Hmm.
And out of that 72%, 33 are, of course, on the hunt for a new job, right? And this is what our hospital friends, they recognize this because I'm talking to nursing leaders every day. And if I talk to one, I've talked to all of them, and they're trying to increase retention
Hmm.
and reduce burnout and build a culture. But, here we are on the other side of the house talking to these nurses in an open, transparent way. And they're saying to us, you're not giving us the flexibility that we want. You're not
Hmm.
giving us the autonomy. You're not giving us the pay we want, right? And it goes back to the pros and cons of a 1099 versus W-2. Well, you're still doing the same work, Keith. It's you making a decision how you want to get paid. If
Hmm.
you don't want that administrative burden of being an independent contractor, which is minimal,
Hmm.
there's software to help you through it and accountants that will guide you through it.
Right.
Then go ahead and be a W-2. But when you go ahead with the W-2, taxes are easier, uh, maybe a little bit more stable. You don't have to think so hard about the retirement planning. You can just click that button. I plan on retiring in the year or whatever and
Hmm.
take X amount out of my paycheck. But you're really limiting your opportunity to empower uh, your own personal brand and your career and to take charge, right? And how many nurses have you known? Everyone goes back to school, not everybody, but many
Many.
nurses go back to school.
Hmm.
Um, Myself included, you have, like, we're always reinventing ourselves. And that is the beauty of nursing, that we are not stuck on one floor, on one shift, or one outpatient center. There are so many things we can do. And this gives us the opportunity to manage our financial responsibilities and allow us to explore and dabble, if you will, in other areas that may not be for you, right?
Right.
So that's what we talked about earlier. You don't like this hospital, you never have to go
Don't
back
go
again.
back. Right. And if a large percentage have another gig, another job somewhere, your survey revealed to you how many shifts per month the average gig nurse works. So, how many shifts do they work?
Well, the 100% gig worker we found works 1.5 times the number of shifts per month than a full-time or an employed clinician. So there's two different ways to look at this. When you're doing gig nursing as a side hustle,
Hmm.
you're averaging about 6 to 7 shifts a month.
Okay.
And then there is the other side of the house where this is their primary source of income and they're working. But that's what they want to do, right? So and just those numbers alone can show you that it is more motivating for folks to work for themselves, because when you are in an employed situation, you will do what is required by the employer. And regardless of the economic opportunity, sometimes you're so burned out that you will decline the extra shifts,
Right.
the
Right.
overtime.
The other thing I'm thinking about right now is in terms of flexibility. So, when you're an employee, right, and you've got your schedule, when you want to go on vacation, you've got to clear it with your employer, right? And you've got to make sure your shifts are covered, et cetera, et cetera. You only can take a certain amount of time. If you need a day off to go to your child's play or a concert your child is involved in or something, you've got to get permission from your employer to take the day off, right? Or if your spouse has to go in for ambulatory surgery or something. So if you're a gig worker, you've got control. And let's say you want to go away for 3 weeks, right? So you can work your butt off and work, many, many, many shifts a week for several months, save up your money. And then when you're ready to go away for 3 weeks, you just go away for 3 weeks. And then when you come back, you pick up shifts again. So do you hear from nurses who like that? Like they can just have control of their lives, not just like not just the taxes, not just all that other stuff, but they just have control of their daily life and they can just do whatever it is they want to do from week to week and month to month.
Well, I think yes. And work life balance seems to be for a nurse top of the mind, as it
Mm-hmm.
should be.
Mm-hmm.
And the burnout is real. And by allowing and embracing this type of work model, we will keep nurses at the bedside that we need. We all will need a nurse someday, and God bless nurses, right? We've all been patients, and nurses are our lifeline. The other interesting thing that this allows you to do, Keith, and think about this, and I've seen this, I've been working in the gig nursing arena for close to 4 years now. There are a lot of nurses that like to spend their summers when the kids are off from school uh, in a more of a resort type of town.
Mm-hmm.
And they are able to, with this gig lifestyle, they are able to pick up their kids and live at the beach for the summer and connect with the local hospitals and nursing homes in that community and pick up one or two shifts a week to supplement their income. It
Right.
also allows them, as they're going back to school, a lot of nurses go back to school online now because of the flexibility that offers. So it allows them to continue their education, to meet their lifestyle choices and their personal needs, and also to maintain, the economic freedom and flexibility and stability that they need
Right.
to.
Yeah, I really love that idea of the nurse picking up her kids or his kids and going living at the beach for a couple months or, even a couple weeks or whatever, and picking up a couple shifts, while they're on vacation, just living at the beach. And I think that's a great example of that level of flexibility. All right. So since we have to start winding down, I want to shift gears a little bit and I want to ask you about Nursa.com. So what is Nursa's mission? What are they all about? And if a nurse was going to wander over to the website, what are they going to find there?
So, nurse's mission is to put a nurse at the bedside of every patient, whether that's inpatient, acute, or out. That is our mission. You could wander over to Nursa at nursa.com and you could see where the open positions are within your community. So, Nursa is a platform to connect nurses to local facilities that are in need of per diem work.
Okay. And is this 100% gig work, like 1099 work, or are
It
these
is
also,
1099.
it's all
Yes.
gig work? Okay. And you were saying that it's hospitals, but there's also ambulatory care positions.
There is, Keith. Nursa functions in both what I would refer to as the acute and post acute space.
Mm-hmm.
So we are in ambulatory surgery centers, we are in rehabs, we are in nursing homes, and we are also in large and small hospitals throughout the US.
See. And in terms of the user interface, so are nurses going on there, finding the gigs they want, and then applying to the employers? Or are the employers also on the platform looking for nurses and then reaching out to potential employees or gig workers?
Yeah, exactly. So, what you do is just a little bit more background. You are an independent contractor. So, you are picking up your shifts off of the Nursa platform, right? It's a marketplace platform for clinicians. So, you would decide where you want to work. You would click on, oh, that looks interesting. There's an ER RN in Philadelphia. Let me click that on. And then you would go ahead and apply. And one of the things that Nursa is JCO accredited. And that's something that I think each and every one of your audience members, as well as us, can appreciate. And to be JCO accredited, it shows the sign of quality. So we are putting our nurses through the same rigor, if you will, that a hospital would to ensure that we are putting quality clinicians at the bedside. that want to be there. So the nurse will go on, they will sign up, and then they'll fill out the form, submit their vaccination records, anything that they would typically do to be employed by a traditional hospital setting, if you will. And then we have a team of nurses that will reach out to them. And if they are an ER nurse and they qualify for that job, then we will start working with them and schedule what we refer to, Keith, as the onboarding process. And as a nurse that has worked in many different hospitals, you could appreciate if you've onboarded at one hospital, you've onboarded at one hospital. So one of the things that we do try to solve for with our hospital partners is creating a lot of the onboarding for our gig nurse community on a digital platform. And once you get approved and everything, the backgrounds check out, then you'll have access to the digital onboarding to do the learnings, to demonstrate the competencies. And then, the next steps are, Keith, the app will turn on for you and you'll have the ability to see where those shifts are open. And then you can request a shift. It's really that simple.
That's really great. Okay. So people should go check it out at nursa.com. And I also wanted to ask you about your interface with the Red Cross. You had mentioned something to me in another conversation about that. And can you tell me a little bit about that aspect?
Sure. This really was relevant to me more so than ever. We've had this unique partnership with the Red Cross. And although there are different platforms out there with the gig nurse lifestyle, we are the only company, and I'm really proud to say this, Keith, that are in partnership with the Red Cross. And what made me think about our partnership just last week, if you will, is when the hurricanes were impacting the folks down in Florida. Mm-hmm. And we were able to quickly market because as nurses, we are always problem solvers and looking to, support our communities. We were able to, give a broad brush and reach out to everyone and let them know if they want to help within their community, whether it was Florida or the Carolinas, they can go on to that link on the Nursa website, Keith, and sign up to be a volunteer in their community. And I think that's important as well.
Oh, I think that's great. That's a really great service. So that goes beyond the 1099 W-2 debate to volunteering and contributing to our communities like many, many nurses do around the country and around the world. So I think that's really awesome that you're partnered directly with the Red Cross. And I have a few extra questions for you in a couple minutes, but I just wanted to ask you about your journey. So I know you began in the ICU and then you worked in administration at a 350 plus bed trauma center, and you've held all sorts of executive roles. So tell me a little bit about what you like about being in an executive role, especially at an organization like Nursa, and how does that affect your kind of like your feeling about your career and about being a nurse? What is that like for you?
So I love the role that I'm in right now at Nursa because one of the areas that I have the pleasure of being in is not only attending a lot of professional nursing conferences and networking with chief nursing officers, but also going out to healthcare systems throughout the country. And as nurses, Keith, aren't we all problem solvers? So it gives me an opportunity to travel across the nation and be able to help folks solve problems. And it doesn't matter what hospital you work at, big or small, what system you're in, everyone is trying to solve the same problem. And what is interesting to me as I work at Nursa and I am on the outside of the walls versus looking in is as innovative as hospitals have been with treatments and like advancements in pharmaceutical and patient care, their operating approach is very outdated for the most part. So but nurses want something different. They do, Keith, and they want innovation. So it really is fun to be able to have the platform and to represent a product that is definitely not the legacy approach. And it gets folks thinking a little different about how to solve the same problem that they've been trying to solve forever and not thinking of contingent labor as a problem, but more of a solution. Because if you can keep your own employees happy and not overburden them with, heavy patient loads and having them work constantly short staffed, you will be able to retain your nurses, reduce your own nurses' burnout. And quite frankly, it's financially attractive for hospitals as well to hire the independent contractors because they don't have to worry about the overtime. They just pay the agreed upon rate and they go on. And from the nurse perspective, the clinicians, it's no different than any other type of marketplace platform job. Like for Nursa, we do give you choices. And when you sign up to be a nurse at Nursa, Keith, you can choose how you want to be paid. We offer two different ways to be paid. You can get paid by the shift. You can get paid every week. It's how you want to get paid, and we will then pay you in that fashion.
That's great. I think I love all the flexibility and all the choices that you're giving to the nurses who use Nursa. So thanks for giving us a little more encapsulation of how it works over the platform. And before we go, I have 4 questions that I like to ask all my guests. And are you game for a little lightning round of a few questions?
I am. I
All
am.
right. So the first question is, how do you define success? What does success mean to you?
I love that question. I feel like it's an interview question, right? And success doesn't necessarily mean money, Keith. For me, success is happiness. And I want to, and if we're talking professionally, correct?
Whatever you just, however you define it.
Oh, however I want to define it.
Yep.
Yeah, a successful day, a successful job is when I feel fulfilled and I'm happy and I feel like I made a difference. That is how I define success.
That's great. Okay. Second question. Could you name or describe one person who's been a real inspiration to you in the course of your life? They can be living or dead. It could be a famous person, or it could be someone none of us would ever have heard of, but who's very important to you.
Oh, that is a good question. Who is the inspiration in my life? Well, I would start with family first. I would say that I was blessed to have two supportive parents that provided encouragement for me to go out and explore the world. And I felt like I also had a very safe landing pad when things didn't go so well. So I feel that my parents would be equally, I can't choose one over the other.
That's all right. Many people have chosen parents.
And please, I grew up in an Italian Catholic family. I would be made to be guilt ridden if I picked one over the other. So I will just go with both.
That's awesome. That's great. Totally understandable. Okay. Third question. Is there a book or a movie or something from the wider culture? It doesn't have to be an absolute favorite, but just some cultural touchstone for you that's had a significant impact on the way you think, the way you live your life, the way you approach your work, your relationships, your parenting, anything at all. Like just something you find yourself going back to.
So that is a great question. And I think that recently I love to read.
Mm-hmm.
And I bounce back and forth from professional books to fiction. And I have been really, over the past year, very obsessed with reading WW2 fiction novels, right? And some Kristen Hanna books. I've recently read The Woman as well, and reading about the nurses in Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
And then Nightingale with WW2. But being a nurse And those stories, they are fiction, but they are based on truth. That is what inspires me and what motivates me. And you see what people in the past have went through, and how they weren't even acknowledged for their efforts
Mhm.
and the sacrifices that they made. I could speak to you for hours on both of the WW2 nursing and the Vietnam nursing
Mm,
eras
I
that
appreciate that.
inspired me.
Yeah. I had two aunts who were actually nurses during World War II. One was one of the nurses who worked directly with George Patton. So
Oh
yeah,
my goodness.
I definitely hear that. Yeah. She used to tell this funny story. I've told it on the show before, but when I was a kid, my Aunt Jan used to say that she was one of Patton's personal nurses and that when he had hemorrhoids, she had him soak his butt in his helmet. So that's could be
I love
it
that.
could just be a tall
And
tale. Could be a tall tale, just saying. But that's something I
I
grew up with.
love that though. Because that it's just such we're blessed that we still have some people still alive from that generation to share those stories. And I think
That's
that
true. Yeah.
that
And
has shaped and informed a lot of my decisions.
I hate to put the picture of George Patton's derriere in your brain. My apologies, but
I'm like visualizing it actually.
if you
So it
must, if
just
you
is.
must. Okay. So moving right along. Fourth and final question. If you were named queen of the world tomorrow and you had absolute power to do everything you ever wanted to do, what would be one of the first things you'd want to do to improve the lives of your subjects? Bearing in mind you would have absolute power.
I love that question.
Hmm.
I have absolute power. So the
Yeah,
first thing I would do to improve the lives of all my subjects is I would take away everyone's worry. I would provide everyone the resources and the opportunities that they needed because I'd have a blank check too, right? In my
you would.
universe, we could do right.
You would.
So I would just allow everyone maybe to stop the grind and be able to draw a bigger sense of community by providing everyone the opportunity.
That sounds awesome. So no worry about money and healthcare and food and
No,
shelter and clothing and all those things.
no, and
That's
I'm not trying to be a socialist here too. It would just be
you
like
could be a
almost
socialist
utopic.
queen. That's all right.
No, it would just be a utopic environment, where everyone is happy and has what they need and they can spend more time engaging in hobbies and what makes them happy. Yeah.
Well, you'd be an awesome and benevolent queen. So thank you. So
Thank you.
Jeannine, you're awesome. Jeannine Raymond, you're the Chief Nurse Executive and Senior Vice President of Client Success at Nursa.com. I want people to go over and check out Nursa.com, Nursa.com. You're also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and you yourself are on LinkedIn. And we'll have all the links in the show notes at nursekeith.com and also in the apps where people are listening. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for doing great work over at Nursa and sharing the story with us and demystifying the W-2 1099 debate a little bit. So thank you so much. And best of luck to you and everybody over at Nursa.
Oh, thank you, Keith. It's been a pleasure. And I hope that we've excited some folks to take matters into their own hands after listening to us chat today. So thank you.
Well, there you have it. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nurse Keith Show. Remember, the show notes will be at nursekeith.com or in the app where you're listening. Please go to nursa.com. That's Nursa.com. Check them out and make sure you say hello. Let them know that you heard about them over on the Nurse Keith Show. If you need personalized, holistic career coaching for your nursing career, look no further than Nurse Keith Coaching and nursekeith.com. Mention the show and get 10% off your first coaching package. And we are proud members of the Health Podcast Network at healthpodcastnetwork.com. And we are produced by the inimitable Rob Johnston of 520R Podcasting. Before we say goodbye, I'll leave you with this quote by the musician Robert Fripp, a quote I think Jeannine will appreciate based on her response about her parents. And that quote is, May my living honor my parents. May my living repay the debt of my existence. Be well, dig deep, seek joy, keep in touch. This is Nurse Keith saying adios till next time from beautiful Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Jeannine Raymond of Nursa.com saying arrivederci from
the suburbs in Philadelphia.
All right, Philadelphia, my old hometown. Thank you, Jeannine. Thanks to everyone for listening, and we will catch you on the proverbial flip side.